Well, I guess it's time to retire another jersey. But that's okay. I have plenty others. I can just wear this. Okay, maybe not that one, but I can wear this. I think I'm going to stop buying jerseys. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to do Packers name, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tommy Sad Grossi. Tommy Sad Grossi. I'll let it work. And today we are going to be talking about the breaking news that the Green Bay Packers will be releasing corner Jaire Alexander today. And there's a bunch to talk about here. There are some conflicting emotions. There are definitely some nuance. There's definitely some question marks and concern for the Packers. And I kind of wanted to package it all together in one nice video and kind of just where I'm at and where I think the Packers are going to go from here and what it means now to not have Jaire Alexander on the roster. So let's talk about a few things here. So if you've been following the Green Bay Packers and Jaire Alexander, you know that this has been an ongoing saga that honestly could have stemmed back to last year, as that there was heavy rumors that he was not going to be returning to the Packers. When he was asked at the end of the season, he was like, I don't know if I'm going to be back here, which I feel like is pretty self-explanatory. And so because of that, there were a lot of fans / beat reporters based off things that they heard that came to the conclusion that Jaire Alexander would not be on the Packers for the 2025 NFL season. Now, as the offseason continued, we saw Jaire Alexander working out Xavier McKinney, and you were like, oh, maybe there's something going on. We were combing through Instagram posts because that's what we do now. But from the team, we really didn't hear much. However, there was some optimism recently when the Packers offered Jaire Alexander a restructured deal. And the whole reason why they had to do that to begin with was because Jaire Alexander was owed more than $16 million for this upcoming season. And based on his availability and how often he's been on the field the past couple years, the Packers were not willing to pay that amount of money. The problem is that they needed Jaire Alexander to, one, accept the lower offer, and two, the Packers to make the offer itself. So with the Packers making that offer, there was some hope that maybe they were going to be able to reconcile, come to a deal, and Jaire Alexander was going to be able to remain on the team. Now, it was reported that the Packers did, in fact, make that offer. It was going to be a one-year deal for less money, and then Jaire Alexander would have been a free agent next season. However, Jaire Alexander said, no, I don't want to take that deal, as I'm sure that he can make more money in the open market in free agency. This also comes with the news that the Packers were actively trying to trade Jaire Alexander. There were rumors that came out that they were talking to the Buffalo Bills and potentially had a deal in the works, but a team did not want to take on that level of contract, again, based on his injury history. So now with Jaire being released, what does this mean? Well, the Green Bay Packers no longer have to pay him all the money that he was owed, and instead they're going to get over $16 million in free cap space. Now, what they're going to do with that, we'll see if they make a splashy signing. Maybe they're going to make that trade for Trey Hendrickson, which honestly I would be absolutely shocked, but very, very happy. But ultimately, I think what they're going to wind up doing, if they don't use it this season, they'll roll it over to next season where they're going to have to pay for some impending free agents. You're looking at guys like Zach Tom, and on top of that, Elton Jenkins, who did report to camp, which is a very good sign, as he is probably going to be the Packers' new starting center. So while it is nice the Packers do get some cap flexibility, as they will need it in the upcoming years, talking about Jaire Alexander, the player, this is still a sad thing as a fan of the player, but also for the Packers' cornerback room. Jaire Alexander is only 28 years old and you think has a lot of football left, but even talking to Mark Murphy today, he basically echoed what a lot of fans have been saying.
First of all, he's been a great player for us. Unfortunately, just injured a lot, and that's unfortunately, that's a big part of our game.
The problem is that the Packers have been playing without Jaire Alexander, and they have been just fine. They had a top 10 defense in almost every category last year, except in passing defense, where they were 13th. Their running defense was 7th, and their points per game allowed was 6th. And so they were still able to field a pretty good defense without Jaire Alexander last year, who only played in 7 games in 2024 and only 7 games in 2023. So the last 2 seasons, he's only played in 14 games. And for the Packers' perspective, who have always been, hey, say we will release a player 1 year too early than 1 year too late, and there are plenty of examples that you can look at for this, but the Packers were not willing to pay this amount of money for a guy who might not be on the field. And I know that sounds very harsh, but that is the business aspect of it, and this is coming from someone who loves Jaire Alexander and doesn't think that the secondary is better without him. The problem is, we've been without him.
Where is Joe?
His last full season was in 2022, which is now 3 years ago. And of course, I'll never forget the 2020 season when he absolutely balled out. And even last season when he did play, he wasn't necessarily that elite talent, but he was still a very good corner. And as I've said before, I have been of the opinion that I would like for them to be able to reconcile this, because when Jaire Alexander is on the field, that secondary is better. I don't think that's necessarily a hot take. But I think what the frustrating thing is the fact that there wasn't any compensation, and on top of that, the Packers didn't utilize the draft to potentially get a new replacement for Jaire Alexander, which would have been very difficult to begin with, with that level of talent, but at least attempting to grab somebody before the 7th round. But as I mentioned before, the Packers still had a pretty damn solid defense last year, and this was without Jaire Alexander for the majority of the season. And so going forward, I think there's just additional question marks at the secondary in terms of depth and also experience. I do love Carrington Valentine, and Keyshawn Nixon has definitely improved this last year, and so while I'm not panicking just yet, this combined with the lack of pass rush we had last year, you want a defense that's going to be able to get you over the top. And so hopefully with the pass rush, you're going to see some development there with Lucas Van Ness, which would definitely help the secondary out, especially with the lack of experience that they do have, but they are going to need a long-term solution in that backfield. Now, I will say that Goody completely revamped the safety room just last offseason, so I have no doubt that he could do this again potentially next year if needed, but it just feels like going into the season, and there is still plenty of time, the Packers don't have a ton of options in the secondary, and that makes me a little concerned pairing with a lacking pass rush. And there are still some options out there for corner if the Packers want to shake that tree. Rasul Douglas, I know a lot of fans would love to see a reunion there, but it is a different scheme, so I don't know if they would bring him back. On top of that, you have guys like Asante Samuel Jr., who were just waiting to see what that injury report looks like. He had neck surgery in April and apparently won't be ready until July. And while he has visited a few teams, I don't know if the Packers are going to take a swing on him. We'll have to wait and see. Also, his tackling does leave some to be desired, but ultimately the Packers don't have the most options in free agency right now to address their corner room. So if the Packers do wind up making some moves for a corner, I imagine it's just going to be a 1-year deal for a vet that they're just going to take a swing on just to get some experience back there. There is also Jalen Ramsey, who has been on the field these past couple of years, but as he has gotten older and with what that contract looks like, I don't think that would be the best option for the Packers, because while you would have an able body and he's still a solid player, I think you're just going to get diminishing returns year after year, and you're also going to have to pay a good amount of money. Now, I would love to live in a world where the Packers do pick up the phone and call the Bengals about Trey Hendrickson, but I don't know if they're going to give up that draft capital, and even though they do have the cap space now, as I said before, they are going to need to utilize it for their upcoming free agents, and there are some big ones coming down the pipe. And so ultimately, I'm sitting here on Monday morning feeling a few things. I am going to miss Jaire Alexander because I really enjoyed him as a player, and when he was on the field, he was a great talent. From the Packers' perspective, he wasn't on the field often enough, especially these past 2 seasons, and so because of that, they weren't willing to pay him the money that he was owed. They offered him a restructured deal. He declined, I'm assuming to make more money in free agency, and that is where we are now. So I don't think our corner room has gotten better. However, I don't think it's changed too much because Jaire Alexander hasn't been on the field. So even if they are where they were last year, that's not too bad, and we'll see what Nate Hobbs does. But ultimately, the Packers still need to figure out a long-term solution back in the secondary. As for Jaire Alexander being a free agent, I'm just waiting for him to sign with the Vikings because, happiness is dead and we don't deserve nice things, and I'm just anticipating it at this point. Or he goes to a different purple team and goes to hang out with Lamar Jackson, his good buddy in Baltimore, which I would love that for the Ravens. But ultimately, Jaire Alexander's time with the Packers, I will always look back on it really, really fondly. He was a great player. On top of that, I think he was great for the community. He was definitely a different type of personality, which just made him stand out even more. And so, yeah, I'm just going to miss him as a player. I do wish him well, unless he goes to the Minnesota Vikings, because I wish nothing but pain for the Minnesota Vikings. But ultimately, the saga of Jaire Alexander with the Packers is over. We'll see where he ends up next, and I assume that whatever team is going to grab him, it's going to be a 1-year prove-it deal, and we'll see if Jaire can earn an additional contract if he has a really great 2025 season. But let me know what you think down in the comments down below. How do you feel about Jaire Alexander being released? Let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com. A big shout out and thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.